The Ottoman-Moldavia Wars. An epic tale of blood, snow, and steel. Picture this. You're standing in a frozen wasteland, surrounded by the screams of dying men, the clash of steel against steel echoing through a blizzard so thick you can barely see your own sword. The year is 1475, and you're witnessing one of the most brutal military disasters in Ottoman history. But how did the mighty empire that conquered Constantinople find itself drowning in blood and snow in the forgotten marshes of Moldavia? I was there, mate, right there in the thick of it all, in that god-forsaken winter of 1475. Picture tens of thousands of us, hardened warriors, veterans of campaigns that had shaken the very foundations of Europe. We were Sultan Mehmed's finest, marching through the snowbound wilderness of Moldavia like some unstoppable force of nature. We'd seen it all, hadn't we? The walls of Constantinople crumbling beneath our cannons, the proud kings of Serbia bowing before our sultan, the fortresses of Bosnia falling like dominoes. We were the hammer of Islam, the sword of the Ottoman Empire, and we'd crushed every enemy that dared stand in our path. What could these backwater forest dwellers possibly do to halt our advance? But Moldavia, bloody hell. Moldavia was different. The land itself seemed cursed, cold and silent as a tomb. Every step we took felt like we were marching deeper into some nightmare realm where the very air wanted to freeze the breath in our lungs. The villages we came across were nothing but ash and charred timber. Wells had been poisoned, their waters turned black as sin. Roads that should have been there simply vanished, swallowed up by thick fog that clung to everything like the breath of ghosts. And then we heard them. Those horns, deep, resonant, echoing through the trees like the call of some ancient god of war. At first, we thought it was just another ambush. We'd faced plenty of those. But this, this was something else entirely. The arrows came from everywhere at once. Not just ahead of us, but from the sides, from behind, from places we couldn't even bloody see. The screams started almost immediately. Good men, brave men, crying out in pain and terror as death rained down from the mist. Horses were going mad with panic, rearing and throwing their riders into the mud. And the ground, Christ, the ground beneath our feet wasn't just wet from rain. It was soaked through with blood and mud, turning into this horrible crimson slush that sucked at our boots with every step. Stephen of Moldavia wasn't just defending his homeland, you see. He was hunting us. Like a master huntsman driving wild boar toward his traps, he was herding us. This massive, supposedly invincible Ottoman army, straight into the swamps, where thousands upon thousands of us would be cut down like wheat before the scythe. It wasn't the cold that killed us, though the cold was bitter enough to freeze a man's soul. It wasn't hunger, though we'd been marching on empty bellies for days. No, it was the fear that did us in. The pure, bone-deep terror of realizing that we, the conquerors of Constantinople, the masters of the Balkans, had walked straight into a trap set by a man we dismissed as just another barbarian prince. I was one of the lucky ones, one of the precious few who managed to escape that bloodbath at Vaslui and live to tell the tale. But the memories of that day have haunted my dreams for decades. Now, settle in, because what I'm about to tell you is the full story of how the Ottoman Empire, at the very height of its power, came face to face with one of its most humiliating defeats. This isn't just another boring history lesson about dates and battles. This is a tale of ambition and hubris, of brilliant tactical genius and catastrophic miscalculation, of how one man's refusal to bow down to an empire changed the course of European history. Let's wind the clock back a bit, shall we? To understand what happened in those frozen marshes of Moldavia, we need to understand the man who orchestrated it all. Sultan Mehmed II, known to history as Mehmed the Conqueror. By 1474, this was a man at the absolute pinnacle of his power. He'd done what countless rulers before him had only dreamed of. He'd taken Constantinople, the last remnant of the thousand-year-old Byzantine Empire, and made it the beating heart of his own Ottoman realm. Fresh from his victories against Uzun Hazen at the Battle of Atulabele, Mehmed was riding high. His eastern borders were finally secure against the Turkic powers that had been nipping at his heels for years. The Karamanids, those persistent thorns in the Ottoman side, had been crushed. The AQ Koyunlu Confederation, once a serious threat to Ottoman dominance in Anatolia, had been scattered to the winds. It seemed like nothing could stop the Ottoman Juggernaut. But then tragedy struck the royal household in a way that would shake Mehmed to his very core. His beloved son, Esad Mustafa, the most promising of his 3 sons and the one everyone expected to inherit the throne, fell suddenly ill and died. Just like that, the future of the Ottoman dynasty was thrown into chaos. Now, you have to understand something about Mehmed II. This wasn't a man who accepted setbacks gracefully. When things went wrong, he looked for someone to blame, and he usually found them. In this case, his rage fell upon Mahmud Pasha, his Grand Vizier and one of the most capable administrators in the empire. Mahmud Pasha had served the Sultan faithfully for over 2 decades. He'd been there during the Siege of Constantinople, had organized countless military campaigns across the Balkans and Anatolia, had helped transform the Ottoman state into a truly imperial power. But none of that mattered when Mehmed's grief turned to fury. The Grand Vizier was arrested, stripped of all his titles and honors, and then executed a move that sent shockwaves through the Ottoman government and highlighted just how paranoid and authoritarian Mehmed was becoming. The man who replaced Mahmud Pasha was Gadik Ahmed Pasha, and there's more than a whiff of palace intrigue about his sudden rise to power. Had he played a role in his predecessor's downfall? Quite possibly. The Ottoman court was a vicious place where ambition often trumped loyalty, and Ahmed Pasha certainly had both the cunning and the ruthlessness to eliminate a rival. Meanwhile, in the distant mountains of Albania, the death of another great leader was reshaping the political landscape of the Balkans. Skanderbeg George Kastriote, the legendary Albanian lord who had kept the Ottomans at bay for a quarter of a century, had finally succumbed to age and illness in 1468. His death left a power vacuum that the Albania struggled to fill. Skanderbeg had been more than just a military leader. He'd been the unifying force that held the fractious Albanian nobility together. Through a combination of brilliant guerrilla tactics, diplomatic cunning, and sheer force of personality, he'd managed to weld the various Albanian clans into something resembling a unified resistance movement. But his son, John II, Kastrioti, was young and inexperienced, and none of the other Albanian nobles commanded the same respect or loyalty. Still, the resistance didn't die. With local Albanian lords continued to fight from their mountain strongholds, supported by limited Venetian aid from coastal cities like Shkodra, Durrës, and Lajou. It was a shadow of the great rebellion that Skanderbeg had led, but it was enough to keep Ottoman attention focused on the region. Sultan Mehmed, despite being increasingly plagued by attacks of gout that kept him confined to his palace for weeks at a time, wasn't about to let the Albanian situation fester. In 1474, he dispatched a significant force under Hadim Suleiman Pasha to deal with the remaining pockets of resistance once and for all. The target was Shkodra, the key Venetian stronghold that served as a lifeline for Albanian resistance fighters. If the Ottomans could take Shkodra, they could cut off the flow of Venetian gold, weapons, and supplies that kept the Albanian rebellion alive. Suleiman Pasha was no amateur. He was the Rumelian Balorbi, the provincial governor of the Ottoman Empire's European territories, and he commanded a force of over 20,000 seasoned troops. The siege began in earnest in May 1474, with Ottoman artillery pounding the walls of Shkodra day and night. The thunderous roar of cannons echoed across the Albanian landscape as massive stone balls crashed into the ancient fortifications. For months, the siege dragged on. The walls of Shkodra crumbled under the relentless bombardment, but somehow the garrison held on. These weren't just professional soldiers. They were fighting for their homes, their families, their very way of life. Women and children joined the men on the walls, carrying ammunition, tending to the wounded, and fighting with a desperation born of knowing that surrender meant slavery or death. The final assault in August was a bloodbath. Wave after wave of Ottoman troops threw themselves against the battered walls, only to be hurled back by the desperate defenders. In that one assault alone, the Turkish forces lost 3,000 men, a staggering casualty rate that spoke to both the ferocity of the attack and the determination of the defense. As autumn approached and the campaigning season drew to a close, Suleiman found himself in an increasingly precarious position. His casualties were mounting, his supplies were running low, and word had reached him that a Christian relief fleet was approaching from the west. Faced with the prospect of being caught between the defenders of Shkodra and a relief force, he made the pragmatic decision to lift the siege and withdraw his forces. The jubilation in Shkodra was matched by celebration throughout the Christian kingdoms of Europe. Here was proof that the seemingly invincible Ottoman war machine could be stopped, that determined defenders could hold their ground against even the most overwhelming odds. But Suleiman's withdrawal from Albania wasn't the end of his campaigning for the year. It was just the beginning of a much larger and more dangerous conflict. As his forces regrouped and resupplied, Suleiman received new orders from Sultan Mehmed II. He was to gather a fresh army and march north toward the Danube, where a new threat was emerging in the Principality of Moldavia. This was no mere border skirmish or raid. This was going to be a full-scale invasion designed to bring one of the last independent Christian principalities in Eastern Europe firmly under Ottoman control. To understand why Moldavia had suddenly become such a pressing concern for Sultan Mehmed, we need to delve into the complex and bloody history of this often overlooked corner of Europe. The Principality of Moldavia, like its neighbor and sister state Wallachia, had emerged in the mid-14th century during a period of massive political upheaval in Eastern Europe. The great Mongol Empire that had dominated the region for over a century was finally crumbling, its golden horde splintering into competing khanates. The Kingdom of Hungary, which had long served as Christendom's eastern bulwark against nomadic invaders, was struggling to maintain control over its vast and increasingly restless frontier territories. Into this power vacuum stepped a collection of ambitious warlords and opportunistic nobles, each seeking to carve out their own little kingdom from the chaos. Around 1345, a Vlach noble named Dragos of Meramiorak was dispatched by the Hungarian crown to establish a border march, a fortified frontier territory designed to shield Hungary's heartland from Tatar raids sweeping in from the east. Dragos succeeded in his mission, creating a realm that would become the foundation of Moldavia as a political entity. But Dragos' successors weren't content to remain as mere Hungarian vassals. Around 1359, a rival voivode named Bogdan I rebelled against Hungarian authority and declared Moldavian independence. This wasn't just a simple change of rulers. It was the birth of a new nation with its own institutions, its own military traditions, and its own royal dynasty. The territory that Bogdan I and his successors controlled was no backwater wilderness, stretching from the Carpathian Mountains in the west to the Dniester River in the east. Moldavia controlled some of the most important trade routes in Eastern Europe. Merchants carrying goods from the Black Sea ports to the markets of Poland, Hungary, and beyond had to pass through Moldavian territory, generating enormous wealth for whoever controlled the customs houses and toll bridges. Most importantly, Moldavia controlled two crucial Black Sea ports, Ackerman and Kili. These were UNT's trading centers. They were strategic choke points that could control access to the entire northwestern Black Sea region. Whoever held these ports could strangle trade, project naval power, or facilitate military operations throughout the region. By the late 14th century, this strategic importance had attracted the attention of three major powers, each of whom coveted Moldavian territory for their own purposes. The Kingdom of Hungary saw Moldavia as a natural extension of their eastern frontier, a buffer against Tatar raids, and a source of wealth and manpower. The Kingdom of Poland viewed the principality as a potential ally and client state that could help secure their southern borders. And the rising Ottoman Empire saw Moldavia as yet another Christian territory, ripe for conquest and incorporation into their expanding domains. For much of the early 15th century, Moldavia managed to maintain its independence by playing these great powers against each other. The key was never to become too closely aligned with any one patron, to always maintain enough independence to switch sides when circumstances demanded it. It was a dangerous game that required considerable skill and not a little luck. By 1451, the delicate balance that had preserved Moldavian independence was beginning to crumble. Bogdan II, the reigning voivode, was murdered by his own brother, Peter III, in a palace coup that sent shockwaves throughout the principality. Peter III wasted no time in aligning himself with the Kingdom of Poland, becoming an official vassal, while simultaneously agreeing to pay an annual tribute to the Ottoman Empire. A classic example of the complex diplomatic arrangements that characterized Eastern European politics during this period. But Peter III's reign was to be short. Bogdan II's son, Stephen, had escaped the palace massacre and found refuge at the court of John Hunyadi, the legendary Hungarian general and regent. Hunyadi, recognizing an opportunity to install a friendly ruler in Moldavia, provided Stephen with troops and support. Alongside his cousin, Vlad III Dracula, Vlad Dracula, Stephen launched a successful campaign to reclaim his father's throne. The young Stephen III, who emerged victorious in 1457, was no ordinary medieval prince. This was a man of remarkable intelligence, ambition, and strategic vision. He understood that Moldavia's survival depended not just on military strength, but on administrative efficiency, economic development, and diplomatic cunning. One of his first priorities was military reform. The old feudal levy system, where nobles brought their own retainers to war, was supplemented and gradually replaced by a more professional, standing army. Stephen recruited mercenaries, standardized equipment and training, and developed new tactics specifically designed to take advantage of Moldavia's mountainous and forested terrain. He also moved to centralize political power, curtailing the privileges of the Vlach nobility and establishing new judicial and tax systems that answered directly to the voivode rather than to local magnates. This wasn't just about consolidating power. It was about creating a more efficient and responsive state apparatus that could mobilize resources quickly in times of crisis. Initially, Stephen was content to continue paying tribute to the Ottoman Empire while maintaining nominal independence. In 1462, he even supported Ottoman forces during their campaign against his cousin Vlad, in Wallachia, helping to secure the strategically vital fortress of Kilia at the mouth of the Danube Delta. But Stephen's cooperation with the Ottomans hadn't gone unnoticed by other regional powers. King Matthias, Corvinus of Hungary, John Hunyadi's son and successor, was deeply concerned about the growth of Ottoman influence in the region. In 1467, he launched a preemptive invasion of Moldavia, hoping to install a more pliable ruler and secure Hungary's eastern frontier. What followed was one of the most spectacular military disasters in Hungarian history. At the Battle of Baia, Stephen's forces utterly routed the Hungarian army, inflicting casualties of up to 10,000 men and wounding King Matthias himself. It was a victory that announced to all of Europe that Moldavia was no longer a minor principality to be pushed around by greater powers. It was a force to be reckoned with. Stephen followed up his victory by launching devastating raids into Transylvania, demonstrating that he was capable of projecting power beyond his own borders. He also successfully repelled an invasion by the Golden Horde at Lipnik, proving that his military reforms had created an army capable of dealing with threats from multiple directions. The early 1470s saw Stephen at the height of his power and confidence. He had successfully defended his realm against Hungarian invasion, had secured his borders against Tatar raids, and had even managed to extend his influence into neighboring Wallachia. But this very success was about to bring him into direct conflict with the most powerful ruler of his age, Sultan Mehmed II. The crisis began with a seemingly minor dispute over the fortress of Kilia. Mehmed insisted that this strategic stronghold should be returned to Wallachian control, presumably to ensure that it remained under the influence of Ottoman rulers. But Stephen had other ideas. Kilia was far too important to Moldavian security and prosperity to be handed over to a potentially hostile neighbor. As tensions escalated, Stephen made a decision that would change the course of his reign and his nation's history. In the autumn of 1473, while Ottoman armies were engaged in a major campaign against Usan Hassan in Anatolia, he formally renounced his tributary status and launched an invasion of Wallachia. The invasion was initially successful. Stephen's forces defeated the Ottoman Wallachian voivode Radu III, Vlad the Impaler's brother, and installed a member of the rival Danikdi dynasty Basarab III on the throne. For a brief moment, it seemed as though Stephen had managed to create a coalition of independent Romanian principalities capable of resisting Ottoman expansion. But the Ottomans weren't about to accept this challenge to their authority lying down. As soon as the Anatolian campaign was concluded, Mehmed dispatched Mihalaglu Ali Bey with 17,000 Akinci raiders to restore Radu III to the Wallachian throne. The Akincis were the shock troops of the Ottoman army, light cavalry specialists who excelled at rapid raids and psychological warfare. Their arrival in Wallachia was accompanied by widespread plundering and devastation as they swept aside Stephen's supporters and restored Ottoman influence. By the spring of 1474, however, the situation had reversed yet again. With Moldavian assistance, Basarab III managed to reclaim power, once more deposing the Ottoman Baktuadu III. Wallachian politics during this period were characterized by rapid reversals of fortune, with different factions seizing and losing power with bewildering frequency. But from Mehmed's perspective, what mattered was that Stephen of Moldavia was clearly the driving force behind the instability. The final break came in the summer of 1474, when Sultan Mehmed sent Stephen an ultimatum that was designed to be impossible to accept. The Moldavian voivode was to immediately resume paying his annual tribute to the Ottoman Empire, travel to Constantinople to pay personal homage to the Sultan, and cede the fortress of Kilia to direct Ottoman control. In return, he would be allowed to retain his throne as a vassal ruler. Stephen's response was as defiant as it was predictable. He rejected all of Mehmed's demands outright. This wasn't just a diplomatic disagreement. It was a declaration of independence that challenged the very foundations of Ottoman supremacy in the region. For a ruler of Mehmed's temperament and ambitions, such defiance could not be tolerated. By the autumn of 1474, official war had been declared, and orders were dispatched to Hadim Suleiman Pasha to gather his forces and prepare for a winter campaign into Moldavia. This was to be no mere punitive raid. It was intended to be the complete conquest and incorporation of Moldavia into the Ottoman Empire. Suleiman Pasha spent the remainder of 1474 gathering reinforcements for his war-weary army in the Bulgarian city of Sofia. Although it was well past the normal campaigning season, most medieval armies avoided major operations during the winter months due to supply difficulties and harsh weather. The political situation demanded immediate action. The force that Suleiman assembled was formidable by any standard. Contemporary sources suggest that his army numbered between 30,000 and 40,000 men, making it one of the largest Ottoman expeditionary forces deployed during this period. This was unjust a collection of local militias or hastily recruited peasant levies. It was a professional army that represented the cream of Ottoman military power. The backbone of the force consisted of the famous Janissaries, the elite infantry units that formed the personal guard of the Ottoman Sultan. These men were recruited through the Devshirme system, taken as boys from Christian families throughout the empire, and trained from childhood to be the ultimate soldiers. They were disciplined, well-equipped, and fanatically loyal to the Ottoman state. Supporting the Janissaries were the regular infantry units that provided the numerical strength needed for major operations. The cavalry component included both the light cavalry raiders we've already encountered and the Timurlisi, heavily armored horsemen who formed the elite striking force of Ottoman armies. Perhaps most importantly, the army included a significant number of Bulgarian engineers and specialists whose job was to clear roads, repair bridges, and maintain the army's lines of communication. Medieval armies lived or died based on their ability to maintain supply lines, and Suleiman was clearly taking no chances. As Turkish troops massed near the Moldavian border, the political situation in the region became even more complex. Bosarab III of Wallachia, recognizing which way the wind was blowing, quickly reverted to his previous status as an Ottoman vassal and pledged to provide a contingent of Wallachian cavalry for Suleiman's expedition. This treachery opened up a clear pathway into Moldavia and meant that Stephen would have to defend against attacks from multiple directions. Meanwhile, Stephen himself was working frantically to assemble his own forces. Unlike the Ottomans, who could draw upon the resources of a vast empire, the Moldavian ruler was limited to what he could raise from his own territories and whatever foreign assistance he could negotiate. The core of Stephen's army consisted of about 20,000 men, roughly evenly split between regular troops and foreign auxiliaries. The Moldavian regulars included professional infantry units, light and heavy cavalry composed of boyar nobles and their retainers, and a modest artillery train of about 20 cannons, not much compared to Ottoman firepower, but sufficient for defensive operations. The foreign contingent was more impressive, reflecting Stephen's considerable diplomatic skills and the concern that his resistance was generating throughout Christian Europe. From Transylvania came 5,000 Shikli infantry, tough mountain fighters with a fearsome reputation for tenacity and defense. Poland provided 2,000 cavalry, elite horsemen who would prove crucial in the coming battle. Hungary contributed 1,800 mixed infantry, cavalry, and handgunners, while even Wallachia, despite Bosarab's official defection, provided 1,000 volunteers who preferred to fight for Stephen rather than their own treacherous foe. By November 1474, Suleiman judged that his preparations were complete. Despite the approaching winter, he began the invasion, crossing the frozen Danube at 2 points and Nicopolis, in a classic pincer movement designed to divide Stephen's attention and prevent him from concentrating his forces against either crossing point. But winter warfare in 5th-10th century Eastern Europe was a brutal affair under the best of circumstances. And these were far from the best of circumstances. The weather had turned savage, even by the standards of a Moldavian winter. Temperatures plummeted well below freezing. Snow fell in blinding sheets, and icy winds cut through even the warmest clothing like daggers of cold steel. The Ottoman army, despite its professional training and equipment, began to suffer almost immediately. Frostbite became epidemic among troops who were more accustomed to the milder climates of Anatolia and the southern Balkans. Horses died by the hundreds, their carcasses frozen solid within hours of their collapse. Supply wagons became bogged down in snow drifts, and the carefully planned logistics that were supposed to sustain the invasion began to break down. Recognizing that his men were already being worn down by the weather before they even encountered the enemy, Suleiman made the decision to rest his troops near Bucharest for over 2 weeks. This pause allowed the Ottoman forces to recover somewhat from the rigors of their march. And it was here that they were joined by Bessarab's promised contingent of 10,000 Wallachian cavalry. But the delay also gave Stephen precious time to complete his own preparations. The Moldavian ruler had no intention of meeting the Ottoman army in open battle, not while he was so heavily outnumbered. Instead, he implemented a strategy of scorched earth and guerrilla warfare that would become the template for successful resistance against numerically superior forces for centuries to come. As the Ottoman army finally entered Moldavia in December 1474, they found a landscape that seemed to have been deliberately stripped of anything that might sustain an invading force. Village after village had been burned to the ground, their inhabitants evacuated to mountain strongholds or across the border into Poland. Wells had been poisoned or filled with debris, making them unusable. Grain stores had been destroyed or removed, leaving the invaders dependent entirely on their increasingly unreliable supply lines. This was unrandom destruction. It was a carefully orchestrated campaign designed to turn Moldavia itself into a weapon against the invaders. Every mile the Ottomans advanced took them further from their supply bases and deeper into a hostile wilderness, where every shadow might conceal an enemy archer. And Stephen's forces were indeed in those shadows, launching hit-and-run attacks that slowly bled the Ottoman army without ever offering the decisive battle that might have allowed Suleiman to use his numerical superiority to advantage. Small groups of Moldavian cavalry would appear as if from nowhere, loose a volley of arrows into Ottoman supply columns, and then disappear back into the forests before any effective response could be organized. These tactics were frustratingly familiar to Ottoman commanders, who had encountered similar resistance from Stephen's cousin, Vlad the Impaler, during their campaigns in Wallachia. But knowing what to expect and knowing how to counter it were two very different things. The Ottoman military machine was designed for set-piece battles and siege warfare, not for the kind of shadow war that Stephen was waging. After nearly a month of this grinding warfare of attrition, Turkish scouts finally brought welcome news to the increasingly frustrated Suleiman. On January 10th, 1475, they had sighted several dozen intact villages in a valley where the Barlad River flows south of the town of Vas. Here, at last, was a chance to rest, resupply, and prepare for the final push to the Moldavian capital. The area seemed perfect for the Ottoman army's needs. The villages appeared to be undamaged and well-stocked with provisions. The valley provided some shelter from the bitter winter winds that had been plaguing the army throughout their march. Most importantly, there was only one bridge across the Barled River in the immediate area, which would allow Suleiman to control his army's movement and prevent his forces from becoming too scattered. But as the Ottoman vanguard began to cross the river on that fog-shrouded morning, the sound that every soldier dreads echoed through the mist. The deep, resonant boom of war drums, Moldavian war drums, coming from the north. Suleiman, convinced that he was facing Stephen's entire army and concerned about being caught with his forces divided by the river, made a decision that would have catastrophic consequences. He ordered a hasty advance, rushing his troops across a single bridge and into the marshland on the northern side of the river. What followed was a masterpiece of tactical deception and battlefield control. The drumming that had so alarmed Suleiman was oncoming from Stephen's main force. It was a deliberate diversion, designed to draw the Ottoman army into exactly the position where Stephen wanted them. As more and more Ottoman soldiers crowded across the narrow bridge and into the confusing terrain beyond, they found themselves channeled into an increasingly narrow valley. The thick fog that had initially seemed like a minor inconvenience now became a nightmare, reducing visibility to mere yards and making coordinated movement almost impossible. And then the arrows began to fall, not from one direction, but from all sides, from the forest, from concealed positions in the marsh, from places that the Ottomans couldn't even see through the swirling mist. These were owned wild shots fired by panicked militia. They were carefully aimed volleys from experienced archers who knew exactly what they were doing. At the far end of the marshland, partially concealed behind earthworks and trenches that had been prepared weeks in advance, waited Stephen's main force, the Moldavian regulars, Polish cavalry, Hungarian infantry, and Transylvanian mountain fighters were arranged in a defensive formation that maximized their advantages while minimizing their weaknesses. As the Ottoman front lines finally made contact with these prepared positions, the battle devolved into the kind of brutal, hand-to-hand combat that medieval warfare was notorious for. Sword against sword, spear against spear, with no quarter asked or given on either side. But Suleiman, positioned at the rear of his army and unable to see what was happening on the front lines through the fog and confusion, was receiving only fragmentary reports about the battle's progress. All he knew was that his vanguard was engaged and that the sound of fighting was intensifying. Making what seemed like the logical decision, he ordered a general advance and began rushing reinforcements across the bridge. This was exactly what Stephen had been hoping for. As more and more Ottoman troops crowded into the killing ground beyond the river, Moldavian cannons and handgunners that had been positioned on the opposite side of the valley opened fire. The psychological effect was devastating. Men who thought they were advancing to support their comrades suddenly found themselves under attack from behind. The narrow wooden bridge, never designed to support the weight of thousands of armed men and their equipment, began to groan and sway under the strain. And then, whether from cannon fire or simple structural failure, it collapsed entirely, plunging dozens of Ottoman soldiers into the freezing waters of the Barlad River. Now Suleiman faced every commander's nightmare. His army was divided, with part of his force trapped on the wrong side of an unfordable river and under attack from multiple directions. Desperate to get more troops across to support his embattled vanguard, he ordered his heavy cavalry to ford the river itself. But here, the weather that had been plaguing the Ottoman army throughout their march finally proved decisive. The river was literally freezing cold. Cold enough that soldiers who fell into it would be dead from hypothermia within minutes. The Wallachian contingent, which had been reluctantly accompanying the Ottoman army, took one look at the icy water and refused to cross. This act of defiance by his supposed allies created a crisis within the Ottoman army Even as the battle was raging, heated arguments broke out between Ottoman officers and their Wallachian counterparts, with accusations of cowardice and treachery flying back and forth. In the end, Basarab III decided that discretion was the better part of valor, and began withdrawing his forces from the battlefield entirely. Meanwhile, on the far side of the river, the Ottoman forces that had managed to cross were finding themselves in an increasingly desperate situation. The initial success of the Sipahi cavalry in pushing back the Shikli infantry and some of the Moldavian professionals had drawn them further into Stephen's trap, stretching their lines and exposing their flanks. And then Stephen played his final card. The war drums that had been heard from the forest on the Ottoman left flank had been another diversion. They had been the signal for the main Moldavian attack. The heavy boyar cavalry, which had been hidden behind a forested hill throughout the battle, now charged into the rear and right flank of the Ottoman army. The psychological impact was devastating. Ottoman soldiers who had been fighting desperately to push forward suddenly found themselves under attack from behind. In the confusion and fog, it was impossible to tell friend from foe, impossible to organize any kind of coherent defense against this new threat. Despite still outnumbering their opponents, the Ottoman army began to disintegrate. Units that had maintained their discipline throughout the grinding march into Moldavia suddenly broke and ran in all directions. What had been a battle became a rout, and what had been a rout became a massacre. For 3 days, the remnants of Suleiman's army fled through the Moldavian countryside, harried at every step by Stephen's cavalry. Ottoman officers who had commanded respect and obedience from thousands of men found themselves hunted like wild animals through forests and swamps they did unknown. Many were captured and executed on the spot, a grim fate that reflected both the intensity of Moldavian resistance and the breakdown of the usual conventions of medieval warfare. When the final tally was made, the Battle of Vaslui emerged as one of the most catastrophic defeats in Ottoman history. The news of the victory spread like wildfire throughout Christian Europe. Here was proof that the Ottoman Empire could be defeated, that determined resistance could succeed against overwhelming odds. Pope Sixtus IV, recognizing the significance of Stephen's achievement, bestowed upon him the title of Atleta Christi, Champion of Christ, the same honor that had previously been granted to legendary figures like Skanderbeg of Albania. But Stephen, despite the celebrations and congratulations pouring in from across Europe, knew that his victory was only the beginning of his troubles. Mehmed II was not a man who accepted defeat gracefully, and the resources of the Ottoman Empire were vast enough that the loss of a single army, however significant, was unlikely to end their ambitions in Moldavia. The years following the Battle of Vaslui saw a dramatic intensification of Ottoman raiding activity throughout the Balkans. The Turkish marcher lords, stung by the defeat of their main army, launched increasingly destructive incursions deep into Christian territory, as if to demonstrate that Ottoman power remained formidable despite the setback in Moldavia. Thanks for watching. If you liked it, please like, comment, and subscribe. I'll see you in the next video. Bye!